All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. To those of you who are participants, welcome to our streaming participants on Facebook Live. Come on in, welcome. I'm Dr. Dania Dunkley, and I'm the founder and board chair of the League of Extraordinary Black Nurses. This afternoon, you are in for a treat. We have an esteemed panel of experts here, and so we just came off of Nurses Week, and it is also graduation season. So we thought that there would be nothing more fitting than talking to our new grads and celebrating their accomplishment by just giving them a little bit of support as they go on to the next phase in their nursing journey. So this workshop is entitled Next Steps for New Grads. And I would like to go ahead and formally introduce my panel. I'm just gonna share, because I always like a little presentation. So I'm gonna share the educator in me, I'm sorry. Okay. I'm gonna share my screen and then we'll get started. Okay. There we go. Okay, so again, welcome to everybody who's still joining us, who just came in. This is a workshop put on by the League of Extraordinary Black Nurses. I'm Dr. Dania Dunkley, your host for this evening, and also the founder of the organization. Today, we're going to be talking about next steps for new grads, and we've got three amazing panelists that I'd like to introduce you to, and I'm just going to go one by one and read a brief bio about each of them. So Renee Carter, as pictured here, is a baccalaureate prepared registered nurse, has 13 plus years in the healthcare industry and 5 years as an OB registered nurse and professional tutor. Renee is also the founder of a tutoring company called New Nurse University Incorporated, where she helps undergraduate nursing students improve academic performance by using remediation techniques throughout their programs. And we are happy to have you, Renee. Next, we have Tiffany Gibson. Tiffany is a nurse educator with a primary focus of professional development, equity, and inclusion in healthcare. I'm just admitting, folks, you got to have like 5 arms to do these things. And I don't have a tech person on hand right now. Sorry about that. Okay. So with a true passion for teaching and cultivating the nursing community, Tiffany works full-time as a clinical educator, part-time as adjunct faculty, and all the time as a nursing educator consultant for her business, New Nurse Academy. Tiffany's love for learning started at a young age and continues in her adulthood. She has 3 college degrees, 2 national specialty nursing certifications, and is considering another advanced degree. With the motto that knowledge is power, but sharing that knowledge is powerful, Tiffany is on a mission to empower, encourage, and educate all nurses all along the continuum and make nursing education clear. Welcome, Tiffany, and thank you so much for sharing with us today. All right, next, we have Dr. Ophelia Byers. She is the Vice President of Patient Care Services and Chief Nursing Officer at New York Presbyterian Hudson Valley Hospital in Cortlandt Manor, New York. Dr. Byers has been in the nursing profession for over 21 years, inclusive of a clinical background in women and children's health and progressive leadership roles over the last 12 years. With diversity, equity, inclusion, team engagement, and employee retention as key priorities in her leadership practice, Dr. Byers has conducted research on racism-related stress and psychological resilience in Black African-American nurses. Recently, her research manuscript has been accepted by a peer-reviewed nursing journal in the US, and publication is forthcoming. Congratulations, that is amazing. Dr. Byers, her husband, and their 2 children live in the New York metropolitan area. Welcome, everyone. To those of you who just joined in to the Zoom room, welcome. I've just introduced our panelists and we are gonna just jump on in here in a moment. Let me stop the share. Okay, just as quick housekeeping, you will have an opportunity to ask questions after the interview with our panelists. Well, it's not an interview, it's a discussion. And so don't forget your questions. If you want to, you can put them in the chat and then we will address each question individually later on, okay? All right, so let's jump on in. And first I have a question for Renee, who is our expert on the NCLEX, right? So for those of you who are in our audience, if you are a new grad, the next step, right? So you've done all this, you've survived nursing school, which is a feat in and of itself, but we have one more hurdle for you. You just threw one more in there. And that's, you know, kind of a rite of passage that we've all had to go through. So the NCLEX. Renee, I have a couple of questions for you and anybody else can also jump in. When is the best time for a new graduate to take the NCLEX after graduation?
So a lot of students do ask me this, and I have a rule of thumb because we all know that life happens. People get married, they have to plan weddings, and they have to, you know, go on vacation and things like that. So I always tell students, at least give yourself 30 days. And that is time to decompress from nursing school, right? Take a mental health day, get some stressors, you know, relieved, and then just hit the books running. So that's my recommendation, is 30 days, because we know life happens and everybody wants to take a break.
Okay, so is that 30 days to start studying or really jumping into preparation, or 30 days until you schedule the test?
So it just depends, because a lot of the nursing programs, they send off like manuscripts and transcripts and things like that to the Board of Nursing, and students have to wait for their ATT. So like if they're waiting for their ATT, which is an authorization to test from the State Board of Nursing, then during that time, they should be kind of like decompressing.
Okay, got it. Thank you for clarifying that. All right, so now as they begin to prepare for the NCLEX by studying, what are some of the top study tips that you have for our new grads?
So some of the top study tips, a lot of new grads look for resources. A lot of nursing programs have reviews at the end of their programs, but really 3 things that a student needs is, the first thing is a comprehensive review book. And it is just to, you know, brush up on your weak areas first and foremost, because, you know, sometimes we start fundamentals way back 2 years ago or 4 or 3 years ago. And, you know, maybe that's the first thing you want to start on. So a comprehensive review book helps you elaborate on the things that you may have forgotten. The second thing is, well, let me give a recommendation. So like as far as resources, the Saunders book is a really good resource. The Saunders Comprehensive. If you want to study by the NCLEX categories, there's a Pearson's, Marianne Hogan textbook, comprehensive review book that you can grab. It's all on Amazon. And those are really 2 good, you know, just for elaboration, the comprehensive review books. The second resource, you need a good, question bank. A question bank that's going to give you rationales as to why the other answer choices are wrong, because it's like you're learning about 3 different concepts in one. So a very good question bank. I always tell students, well, UWorld is what's popping right now, but Kaplan is still good. They have a wonderful question bank, and so does Hearst, the Hearst Review. So they have a really good, where the answer choices are really explaining, you know, why you got that answer choice wrong. And then the third resource, you need a set of test taking strategies. And Kaplan, again, comes very well in that area because they have a strategies book which actually breaks down the categories and how you should be approaching those concepts. So the three things are, you need a comprehensive review book, you need a set of a question bank with good rationales, and you need a good set of test taking strategies.
Thank you so much. Any of the other panelists want to chime in on any tips for NCLEX prep?
I agree with Renee in regards to those three tips. The other thing too that's really important is to not to wait for forever. And so yes, 30 days to decompress. Nursing school was hard. It's time for you to refill your cup before you dive back into studying. But you also don't want to take more than 6 months before going back to taking NCLEX, because the further removed you are from nursing school, nursing concept, nursing education, the more that's going to play with your confidence and your competence level in taking the test, regardless of how well you're preparing for it. You don't want to be too far removed from nursing school and actually taking the NCLEX.
Agreed. Dr. Byers, you have anything you want to add?
I have nothing to add to that.
Okay. Awesome. Awesome. All right. Don't forget, if you have questions, don't lose your thoughts. Put them in the chat or write them down if you have a notepad so we can get to your questions afterwards. Okay. So Renee, back to you. What are some of the most common or most frequently asked questions that you get? Because you tutor students who are getting ready to take their NCLEX. What are some of the most commonly asked questions that you get from your students or from those candidates who are getting ready to take the test?
My number one thing is, how do I stop second guessing so much? And it's like, well, you got to be aware of what you're doing when you're answering questions, right? If you're reading the answer choice too fast, okay, and you're skipping over keywords, that's a problem. If you are, well, at the end of the day, second guessing too much is the cause is you don't trust that you know the information. You don't trust yourself enough. So what I literally had to do was I had to write down everything, write down what my first mind was, and then write down what I actually chose. But then when I looked back at my paper and I saw everything I got wrong because I didn't trust my first mind, it just put it in perspective for me. Like, okay, you can trust your first mind. So you're never going to ever stop second guessing, but you can limit it to a point where it's not taking over your exam. So that's the first thing. How do I stop second guessing so much? And then, how do I approach select all that apply? I hate those questions. Well, everyone I know says use true and false method. Well, that didn't work for me on every question. So I had to come up with a new, strategy or technique or pivot. And one of the Kaplan instructors that came to our nursing program at the end of our program, she said we could use a strategy that was different from true or false, and it was promote, prevent, especially on the safety questions. Go down each answer choice and see what this answer choice is promoting. Is it something that you want? Great, keep it. If it's something that you do not want, then you eliminate it. So again, with the test taking strategies is really in addition to like the content knowledge. You need both of those in order to tackle those select all that apply. Let me think. Another one is, so the main three things is about study habits. Okay, content success. Everybody doesn't know how to break apart the content, doesn't know how to study the content. And then questions. How do I break apart the questions? How do I, these questions are different from my prerequisite questions I had when I was pre-nursing. Well, it's making you really critically think. So you have to put yourself as the nurse majority of the time to answer these questions. So, those are the main three things that I've narrowed it down to. It's just like second guessing, select all that apply, study, habits and routines, content, and then questions.
Thank you. Anybody else have any input? Do you get questions from your students, Tiffany?
I do, and I agree with Renee about the second guessing. Naturally, that's what you're going to do is a second guess. One of the things that I tell my students is if you don't have a rationale for your second guess, then that's not the right answer. Because the whole purpose of coming up with the answer is that it's answering the question and it's giving you the outcome that the question is looking for. So if your second guess answer does not answer the question and give you the outcome that the question is looking for, then that's not it. And there's lots of research articles on second guessing. Majority of the time that we second guess, we're wrong in it because we are basing our answer off of fear, emotion, instead of concept and logic. And so if you ever go back to a nursing test and you look and you're always like, I had it right the first time, but there was something about you in that moment that made you insecure about your answer. And that's not really a strategy. That's something that you have to have a talk with yourself about. You have the confidence to answer the question. By the time you go to the NCLEX, you have graduated nursing school. So if you've graduated nursing school, then you know the content.
Right.
Right. You have everything in you because you passed.
Mhm.
Have to trust yourself. Mhm.
Absolutely. I know everybody struggles with second guessing. I'm currently in a teaching capacity as well. And my students constantly, every time we go over exams, it's, oh man. But one of the things I also try to tell them about test taking, when you're reading the stem of the question, don't even look at the choices. Come up with the
That's a
answer
good
in
one.
your head first before you look down there. Chances are what you are thinking is going to be one of the options. And then you already know you're right. Don't second guess it. Just go with, like you said, Renee, my mom always used to say it, follow your first mind.
Yes.
But we do it. We all do it.
Yeah, that's what I do with a lot of my ATI remediation students. I will give them a set of questions without the answer choices. And I'm like, if you can really break down this question and you know the expected outcome of what the question is really asking you, then you shouldn't have any problems. So.
Awesome. So I have one more question for you specifically, Renee. Are there any new changes or guidelines that for the NCLEX exam that new grads should be aware of right now?
Absolutely, yes. So a lot of times I get students that come to me with a lot of misinformation. My teacher told me this. A friend of a cousin who's a nurse told me this. And it's like, listen, go to ncsbn.org. They have the facts that you need. It's like they have the before, during, and after. They have the approach to how the NCLEX scores you. What do you do when you run out of time? What do you do, if you get all the questions? They have those in the frequently asked questions section. So I always point my students to that resource. Please go to ncsbn.org and fact check what whoever told you about the NCLEX. And that will boost your confidence too, knowing more about the exam before you get there. It reduces your fear, right? Builds up your confidence. So definitely that's one of the resources. Get a mentor. Not a coach or a tutor, but an actual mentor, somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, somebody that you can, get advice from. That's really important. So we're all over social media. I'll seek out a nurse educator. Yeah, that's all I got.
Okay, awesome. Any changes to the types of questions or the way that things are going to be scored?
Yes, so actually due to COVID back in October 2020, they lessened the amount of questions for everyone, PN and RN. So it's minimum 75, maximum 145. That's going to last all the way up until, unless they change something, but it's going to last all the way up until 2023. When they release the new generation, the next generation NCLEX, which is the revamp of the whole system of questions and how they're giving the exam and things like that. So also they stopped using the rule, the run out of time rule, it used to be if you ran out of time, they only used the last 60 questions to score your exam. And if you was below, you failed. If you was above, you passed. But now they're using your whole exam if you run out of time.
Okay.
So make sure you don't run out of time. Build your stamina up, right? 25 questions in 20 minutes at home with a timer. If you could beat that, you can definitely not run out of time.
Good tip.
And yeah, that's pretty much it.
Thank you so much, Renee. Thank you. So we've got some more questions for our other panelists. We're going to shift gears away from the NCLEX. Either Tiffany or Ophelia, Dr. Byers, whichever, whoever wants to jump in first. What are some of the must-haves? Well, let me preface this question by saying where we're going with this. Now we're going to talk about, you've passed, right? You've passed your NCLEX, or even before you pass, maybe you're looking for jobs, because there are some facilities that will hire you before you pass. I know when I back, I'm not going to say how long ago I graduated, but it wasn't that long. But yeah, when I graduated, my first job, I hadn't passed my test yet. So it was very nerve-wracking for me. I had a lot riding on those results. So yes, some facilities will hire you prior to passing. So if you're in the process of applying to a job, this is where our next set of questions are headed. And also, once you get that job, what can you expect? All right, so the first question is, what are some of the must-haves or must-dos that candidates applying to jobs as new grads, for candidates applying to jobs as new grads?
I'll start first. So the resume is your invitation to the party, right? Resume is your invitation to the party. And so if you have a solid resume, meaning it is free of grammatical errors, it is easy to read, it doesn't have every single clinical in there too. You can just group that unless there's something spectacular that happened for your clinical. You don't need to tell us that you worked at Wendy's at the age of 14. Like, it really has to be a concise resume that highlights you, and that is your invitation to the party, and the party is the interview. And once you get to the interview, having a strategy on how you're going to brag about yourself to set yourself apart from every other new grad that is looking for the same position is what's going to make you memorable and want someone to make you a part of the team. And even before then, during your clinical, right? Because there are a lot of SUs that are going back to in-person clinical, in-house clinical. That is also a part of your interview as well. You are on the unit, you are at the facility, you are meeting your future coworkers and future managers and future admin. Introduce yourself and put yourself out there and let them know who you are, because now when it's time for you to apply, you can reach back out to them to say, hi, I was on the unit spring 2020. I just put in an application for this position. Can I use you as a reference, or just giving you a heads up? You definitely want to leverage your network. You want to make sure that your resume is up to date and ready to go. And then you want to have a strategy for interviewing. One of the things that I tell my clients is your interview should be a conversation. It should not be an interrogation. You don't want to have the interviewer ask you a question, you dryly answer that question, and then you wait for the next question. You want it to be an exchange. You want it to be communication and conversation, because that's what makes you memorable, and that's what lets your personality show, and that's what we're hiring. When I'm looking for nurse externs and I'm interviewing for my department, I'm looking for someone that I can go get coffee with in the cafeteria because I like their personality. And so that's something to look out for. You want to make sure that your personality shines during your interview, and that you're memorable, because that's what we want to hire, someone who we remember. And at the end of your interview, a thank you note goes a long way. Handwritten is all the stars, but even just a thank you email, it really does kind of sets the tone, and it goes a long way.
Amazing tips. Dr. Byers?
Good afternoon, everyone. I just want to pause to say, Dr. Dunkley, thank you for this opportunity. It's an absolute pleasure to be on this panel with Renee and Tiffany. Please call me Ophelia. how do I follow these rock stars? So I certainly agree with everything that Tiffany said about preparing your resume. You know, the presentation is everything. That's our first glimpse into who you are. So really think about how you want to represent yourself. It's great to be succinct as well. One of the things that I would recommend is if you have past work history, speak to some of the skills that you got from that you think will, because you really want to show that the transference of those skills and those key characteristics and competencies, and challenge yourself. I don't think that there's any job that I can't figure out how to transfer skills and key competencies to nursing. Because there's so much between the analytical part of what we do, the clinical part, the customer service part of it. There's always some way that you can connect the dots. So do that. Leave little room for interpretation, right? Control your narrative. That's incredibly important throughout your career. And you can start doing that with your resume, especially if there's a requirement for a cover letter. I know people do not like cover letters, but that's a really great opportunity to connect dots for the person. So you can tell them, again, here's what you can expect on me based on what I've done in the past. So while I don't have nursing experience, my work in the community, my work as a Girl Scout leader, whatever that is, these are skills that I can bring, right? So that's incredibly important. I would also say the same thing with the interview. I agree it should be a conversation, but here's the tricky part. Does the interviewer know that? So to some degree, you're at the mercy of that person's competency as an interviewer. So one of the things that I would say is a really great competency for any employee, and I would ask you to read a little bit about this. You can look up Harvard Business Review, or just look up the phrase manage your manager. And behind that is, even though, you know, there's a leader in all of us, right? And you can kind of control the climate to some degree in that sense. So what about when you open up? I'm really glad to be here. This is not an exact quote, but I'm really glad to be here. I'm grateful for the opportunity to dialogue with you today and to tell you a little bit myself, and also to get to learn about you and the organization. So to some degree, you're setting the tone that your expectation is a dialogue, if that makes sense. And you're also managing that person as well, because then you allow them to kind of hopefully relax a little bit and have that conversation. So also think about what you want to get from the interview and use your opening line as an opportunity to set that expectation, right? And manage that person's expectation. Yes, you need a job, but the reason why you're being interviewed is because they need a teammate. Right? So there's a give-take situation happening here, and hopefully one that will be mutually beneficial. So just remember that the fact that you got to that interview means that you're someone of interest, and there's a need on that team. So you really want to walk in that power. Those are just some basic things. I would also say, going into the interview, you don't know that you'll have a whole lot of time to ask questions, but you certainly should be prepared. Think about 3 questions. You're probably not going to get to more than 3, if that, and then prioritize them. What are the most important things to you as a new person coming into a new profession, perhaps in a new site, or it may not be. You might be moving up at your site. But what are the key things that you want to know? Things that I would want to know, I'd want to know about, what does orientation look like? What can I expect from that, right? What are the support structures in place? What can you just give me a brief overview of what that looks like and for how long, right? Things like that show that you're thinking, but also that show that you care about how you're going to be cared for as a new employee, new to the profession. Ask questions about shared governance. Ask questions now known as professional governance. Whether it's a magnet designated organization or not, hopefully every Department of Nursing values the voice of the people who are closest to the work, and have a model for shared governance. be a little concerned if someone can't speak to that prolifically. You want to be in an environment that supports your RN autonomy, that values your voice, and then not just asking philosophical questions, because this is what your interviewer does, right? So interviewers are trained in behavioral interviewing, where we don't just say, tell me what you think about this. We ask very specific questions. Tell me about a time when, what happened, what was the outcome? So I want you to reverse that. And if you ask about shared governance, say, tell me about a recent, a time recently where shared governance, that model was applied, or tell me about the committees that you have. Ask for very concrete things, because that gives you a sense of really whether or not that's alive and well in that organization. I hope that was helpful.
I do want to add on, Ophelia, that was great. And it made me also think of, while you are preparing for questions to ask at the end, also prepare for anticipated questions that they're going to ask you. So tell me about yourself. Why nursing? Why here? Why this field? Your strengths and your weaknesses. All those are common interview questions that, as anyone coming into any interview really should expect to hear. So know your strengths and your weaknesses. And your weaknesses don't necessarily have to be a bad thing. They could be your strengths, but give a different perspective of why they could be a hindrance or a barrier or a challenge for you. Your strengths could be things that you love, things that you're naturally gifted in, things that come easy to you, things that you love to do. The other thing, tell me a time when, right, there was a challenging situation, and how did you overcome that? So you want to be prepared to ask questions at the end. You really should never leave an interview without asking the interviewer a question, even if it's about them. Where'd you go to school? How long you've been working here? Something. But you also want to be prepared for questions that they're going to ask you, so that you're not stumbling, and that you know how to articulate your value, and you know how to pitch yourself to make you the best person for the job.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And I want to add something. Going back to the questions to ask, also, you definitely want to know if they have a nurse educator on the unit. I once went to a travel nursing assignment where there was no nurse educator on the unit, and they did not have checklists for newcomers coming in to follow, to document in their system, or grab the PDF file from here, or document in this chart like this. So definitely that's one of the questions that's important. And then just to piggyback off of the transferable skills, if you Google using the search words resume transferable skills, there's and just click on pictures, there's a template that comes up, and it will give you like starter phrases that you can use and implement into your resume. So I'm just going to read one off of here. It says performing skills, able to make presentations for a video or television in a interesting way, able to entertain, amuse, or inspire audience. So it just gives you a starter phrase to put in there. So go down these lists and see what transferable skills you have that apply to you, and use those.
Awesome. Each of you, awesome tips. I don't know what I could even add. Awesome. Okay, so now they've gotten the job, right? So once hired, right, what should a novice nurse, and I'm hopeful, I'm using this terminology, but there's a theory about when you first enter the profession, and then as you develop and grow towards becoming an expert in your field. So novice is the very, very basic entry point, right? So what should a novice nurse expect in the first few weeks or months of their employment or their new careers?
They're going to feel overwhelmed, because that transition from student to professional is a lot, and it happens fast. And so One of the and that's why Renee mentioned ask if there's an educator, because one of the things that is going to be important, and Ophelia mentioned this, is how are they caring for the new person coming in? Is there a mentorship group? Is there a residency program? How long is orientation? What does orientation look like? And orientation should not just speak to the clinical competency of the new hire. It should also socialize this new person and speak to the psychosocial aspects of being a nurse, because nursing school does not prepare you for real life nursing. Clinical is not real life nursing. You go from having 1 or 2 patients on clinical, from having 6 to 7 patient daytime on a med search unit, and you're like, what? You know, when they're like, call the nurse, you're like, yeah, call the nurse. Oh no, the nurse is me. Hold on, wait. Hold on, everybody, hold on. And so for the new nurse coming in, it's a lifestyle change, it's a mental shift, it's a lot. And so where do you go to unload and vent? Who is your support? Your clinical support, your psychosocial emotional support. What does resilience look like? What does success look like as a new grad? But then also know for the first 12 months, you're not going to know everything, right? Critical thinking is the combination of experience, education, and exposure. And as a new nurse, you're not going to have that yet. And so comparing yourself to other nurses on the unit does a disservice to you. You're going to get there with time and with the right resources in place. But coming out of school thinking that you had a 4.0 GPA in nursing school, so you're going to be a rock star nurse, is not the same. And that level of expectation puts this added stress to you. So give yourself grace and mercy to being new. You being new is actually working for your favor, because everybody knows that you're new. So take advantage of that. Meet people, ask questions, put yourself in situations. Even if it's not your patient, jump on in, because the more exposure you have, the more experience you have, the more education you have, the more you become confident, and the more you start building your critical thinking skills. And utilize your precepts or your mentors. Who is your go-to person on the unit? Are you having meetings with your manager often? The times you meet your manager is not when something is going wrong. That should not be the only time you're talking to your manager. It should not be when something is going wrong. It should be a constant communication and a rapport with the people on your unit, and take advantage of that. The other thing too, that's really big for me, and that's why I started my mentorship group, the Personal Preceptor Club, is the after. What happens after the shift? How do you decompress after the shift? What are your thoughts after the shift? Let's debrief after. What are you doing when you're not at work? Because all of that is going to affect you when you are at work. And if we can identify stress and burnout for that term for what it is, and I put it in quotes because I don't like that term. If we can identify things that lead you to resentment of nursing, right? And wanting to leave the bedside 6 months in because it's not what you thought it was. If we can identify those things ahead of time, then hopefully that will add to the longevity of your nursing career, because that does set the foundation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Tiffany.
That was great. I mean, you know, so many jewels. I will start with this. You know, as a nurse executive and nurse leader, you're an employee now, right? You are now 100% accountable for the mission, vision, and values of the organization. And yes, you're new, but you're an employee now. And so now there is that, while you have this newness, you have this responsibility and you have this accountability to the work that you're doing. And so it's now you have these 2 buckets that have to always be filled, or in a state of being filled at the same time, in tandem. And that is, what can you expect and what is expected of you? And you need to be very clear about those things at all times, right? And so it is, you start setting some of that forth in your interview, right? Here's what I'm bringing. Here's the value that I'm adding to your organization. And also here's the value that I'm looking for from your organization. So you start setting that stage in your interview. You've been hired. Now that is your thought process at all times, right? Because that's what's going to keep you empowered as well. And kind of charting your own course. Orientation is not something that's happening to you. right? It is something that you get to be a part of and to hopefully direct, right? It should be customized to what your needs are. So there's an orientation checklist. Yes, that is basic. These are the core skills and competencies and that have to be fulfilled in order for you to come off of orientation. But also it's a discussion to be able to say, here's what I need uniquely. These are things I may be strong in. These are things I'm not as strong in. I feel like I need more of these experiences. What I would certainly say is ask for regular meetings with your educator. And I like to think of, if you remember from your psych classes in undergrad, Carl Jung had this concept of quaternity, right? And his concept was that Trinity, you know, the number 4 is whole. And so Trinity is not quite complete. And so your quaternity, your village, if you will, is your educator, your preceptor, your manager, and your teammates, your interprofessional cross-departmental teammates, right? That's the whole hospital. But that's your village, right? And so it is saying that these are touch points that you need throughout your organization to be, throughout your orientation to be successful. You want to make sure there are frequent meeting points with your preceptor and your manager and your educator to say, here's progress. It's for feedback. Feedback is incredibly important. Communication, it sounds trite or overwrought. We say communication all the time, but truly that's the lifeblood of all relationships, right? And so you want to make sure that you're continuously not only getting feedback, hopefully positive feedback, also constructive, here's what you can do better, but that you're also giving feedback. Here's how it's going for me. Here's what I need more of. This is a little hard for me to say, but I'm concerned about the dynamic with my preceptor and I.
Yes.
It's not always a good fit, right? And so it's having that confidence, and confidence does not mean that there is no fear, right? Sometimes fear drives our confidence. It's about, I want to thrive, and my desire to thrive is greater than my fear, right? And so then your confidence comes in there, right? So using those opportunities, I recommend that those be weekly touch bases, but every organization is different in how they go about that. That's going to be important for you to know right away. So when you first start, you want to know, hopefully, how long is orientation? There should be an orientation schedule outlined so you know exactly what to expect over that period of time, at least definitely during the first couple of weeks. You should know exactly who your preceptors are, already be assigned and waiting for you. Sometimes it's 1, but with flex shifts, it's at least 2, typically. It should not be 5. There should be, a primary and a secondary. Things could happen and you might end up being with someone else, but then there should be a handoff, right? So that they know they can pick up seamlessly where you left off. That's where the orientation checklist is helpful. Making sure that your orientation, what I love about orientations is that you are not counted in the numbers for staffing, right? Because you're on orientation, you're learning. So you are not taking a full patient assignment. During that time period, the world is your oyster to some degree. So it's a really great opportunity to say to your manager, is there any room for me to shadow on another unit? To go to another department entirely, right? And learn what they do there. Can I visit the supply room? Because that's the place you call when you run out of IV bags and all those kinds of things. Go see that area. Go see what it looks like in the work that they do. Why is that important? In teams, respect and collegiality sometimes are challenged, right? Sometimes can erode when we don't really have an understanding of each other's work. You can never have a full understanding, but at least going and showing that respect and that deference is a great opportunity. I would love for organizations to work this into their orientation plans. But if your organization hasn't asked for those other experiences that aren't on the checklist, but give you a sense of how the operation works, right? So these are things that you can do. I just want to quickly go back to something Renee said earlier, because the things that Renee said really are lifelong career tips. Stop second guessing your study habits. your content confidence. I don't think I have the exact words, but fact checking, the way you fact check after policies, read them yourself. Read them yourself. So because your preceptor is going to give you to some degree philosophy, right? Based on their experience, and that is valuable. But at the end of the day, your practice is based on the policies of that organization, and you need to know them. So when you have downtime, whatever that looks like when you're in orientation, pull up some policies, read them, start to understand them. Questions. Never stop asking questions. Never stop inviting questions, right? That's going to be incredibly important. Everything that Renee said is transferable throughout your career, to be quite honest with you. It's all just about the facet of it. So I would just say, once again, keep in mind, you're an employee now. It's two things. What can you expect and what is expected of you? You will be somewhere after your probationary period. Ask about your probationary period. Some organizations, it's 3 months. Some organizations, it's 6 months. I guess it could be longer, depending on how long your orientation is and what specialty area you're going into. But that's that period after which you are considered fully onboarded. And that's usually a period at which you get a probationary evaluation, right? That's documented and goes into your record. And it's a version of the annual performance review, upon which your merit increase may be based for your salary and things like that. That's formal documentation. Ask about it. Ask early on, will I have a probationary evaluation? If so, may I see it? May I know what I'm being evaluated on? That helps you understand what to focus on. So these are just some of the things that can be very, very helpful to you in terms of, again, knowing what is expected, and then, of you, and then communicating what you expect. I hope that's helpful.
Excellent. I learned a couple of things from you myself. I hadn't thought about, and I've done so many employee orientations where we do the scavenger hunt thing, right? Go find things on the unit. Where is this? Where is that? But outside of your unit, right? It's a whole nother world. And sometimes with, there are three of us on here that are OB nurses, right? You can get so like caught up in just your own little bubble in OB that, it's like, where's the pharmacy again? Where's the ED? Well, maybe the ED is not so foreign for us, but other areas of the hospital that you just like, it's like no man's land, right? So to gain a sense of community and, like Ophelia said, collegiality, and to get a sense of, earn a sense of just awareness of what other people do, other specialties, what do they do, and what they go through. That's an excellent idea. And I think it certainly should infiltrate the orientation process everywhere. Absolutely. All right, anybody else?
Yes, I just want to add something. Everything Ophelia said was very, very, very helpful. Again, you guys have to understand, in nursing, real world is so different from nursing school. There are many, many, many different ways to do one thing. Many, many different ways to do one thing. So sometimes you just have to sit back and watch whatever preceptor you have and let things play out. Now, that's not me saying if something is unsafe, you don't speak up. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, there's many different ways. One preceptor may do one thing, and then your night shift preceptor may do a totally different thing. That is why you need to fact check with that policy and make sure you're doing the correct thing. That's just what I want to say.
No, that's an excellent point. There's so much room for variation. And the last thing that you want to do is learn bad habits, right? So you got to check those policies, and don't be afraid to ask a question. Is that the correct way? I noticed in the policy, it says this, because you don't want for a regulatory agency to come in and ask a question and they may ask you as the new person. A lot of times they kind of like to pick on the new person to see what they've been taught. And is your orientation process sound, right? So you want to match what your policy says. And then you want to also do as your policy says.
Yes,
You know, it
yes.
shouldn't just be in words, because then they're going to ask you to do it or observe you doing it, and it should all match. Then they're going to go to the patient and say, is this how your nurse did A, B, and C? So you don't want to just be lip service. Make it a part of who you are and what you do to abide by those policies.
If your
Yeah,
priest
no.
says this is how we do it on this unit, that is a key for you to go fact check it.
Yeah, definitely.
Drift from
Definitely.
practice is it happens. And sometimes people don't even know that they've drifted from practice. But if you hear this is what I do, or this is how we do it on on day shift, or I know we're not supposed to do it this way, but I'm gonna just show you a quicker way to do it, you should go fact check.
Red flag.
Right.
You are now an employee. You can't use that excuse that you were
No
a student.
excuses.
No, there's no excuses about not knowing, because everything that you do, you're supposed to be competent before you're doing it, right? If that means taking a timeout before you put in the Foley, or checking the policy and taking the job aid with you and bringing it into the room and going down the list. That's why we have checklists, y'all. Checklists are there for a reason. And the checklist relates to a procedure that relates to a policy. And when it's time for us to figure out what happened and why it happened, one of the questions is, well, did you follow the policy, or did you know? So you want to be able to make sure you are accountable for you and not what he said, she said.
Yeah. And I know I talked about regulatory agencies and, being accountable to your organization, but don't forget the patient. The policies are there to protect our patients, to reduce errors, right? And so you want to make sure that you are following, because the policies are based on best practice, right? Evidence-based. So you want to do what's best for your patient. And that's just, taking a shortcut might run you the risk of harming your patient. All right. So lots of gems. I hope y'all are taking notes, because this is good stuff. This is good stuff for free. Okay.
I was telling them to bring pen and paper.
All right. So next question I had, we kind of touched on a few of these, but maybe list one or two challenges that you notice that are particular to new nurses coming in, and what are some of the strategies that you can suggest for them to kind of get through those?
One of the things that I see as an educator and a staff development specialist is the new person coming in feels that they don't have a voice, or that their opinion doesn't matter. And actually it's the complete opposite, because them being new, they're not jaded and they're not biased. They're coming in as a fresh set of eyes to the situation, and they're more closely connected to the textbook and more recent evidence, because they just came out of school, compared to someone who's been doing this for like 25 plus years and hasn't picked up a journal article in forever. And so it's the new grad that actually is more closer to research, and says, well, actually, there's a new article that I read, or can you just confirm this? Or I thought this. And a lot of the new nurses are afraid to speak up and finding their voice due to fear, intimidation, being rejected, whatever the variable is. Your voice matters. And so even if you don't speak up, whisper. Even if you don't verbalize it, write it down. Who is your go-to person that you can vent to? You have to have at least some person in the facility that is your go-to person, your mentor, your preceptor, your educator, someone, another new nurse, right? Because there's this power in numbers as well. So you speak up, because your voice does matter. And there's different ways that you can speak up in different lingo. In my hospital, we use cuss, right? I'm concerned. I need more understanding. Please stop, right? CUS or STAR, stop, think, act, review. So, hospitals are really big in acronyms and using acronyms for whatever, but there's different ways that you can question someone without making that other person feel as if you're questioning them and their ability, because that's when ego pops up. So I'm not questioning you as a nurse. I just want to know why we're doing it this way. And can you help me understand? Because that's not what I was taught, or that's not what I was read. And I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page. So one of the challenges that I see for new nurses is the difficulty with them speaking up, because they think that they're not going to be heard, or that they're wrong, and that no one's going to take them seriously because they're the new kid on the block.
Yeah, definitely a good one. Thank you.
Another thing that I
Anyone
see a
else?
lot of times is the physicians. The physicians are not the big bad wolf. They are your teammates. You collaborate with them, right? You are their eyes and ears, because most of the time, if you're not in a teaching hospital, they're not going to be there. And that's when you need to step up in your autonomy and say, okay, I need to have everything ready before I call this physician in. I need to have my recommendation ready. Use that SBAR. Practice your SBAR, please. Because I have got hung up on so many times from not having the correct information, not knowing what was going on, and just hurry up and call a physician. And then another thing, get to know your physicians. They are people too. Like I said, they're not the big bad wolf. Learn how to communicate with them. Learn what they like, what they don't like, and just look at them as a teammate, a collaborator. We are not in the 1960s, 50s, whatever, when the doctor walks in a room and you're sitting down, you need to get up. Like that, we're not there anymore. Times have changed. We're teammates, and you need to treat them as such and communicate with them as such. Build a relationship with your physicians, whether it's a teaching hospital or not.
Amen to that.
Right. So much good stuff. There are obviously a number of things, right? When I think about new nurses, I think there's different ways to look at new nurses, right? And I love that you use novice nurse as well, because there are the new grads, which is primarily what we're speaking about today. There are nurses who are experienced but changing specialties and go from expert to novice, right? There's a lot of different ways that you can be new, and that can be very intimidating. There has to be a mindset shift, though. Again, it's okay to feel a little fear, a little anxiousness. That is normal. Actually, it is healthy, because it says that you are self-aware. Anyone who is fearless, I worry about, because it means that you don't understand. You're not using a critical eye, and you're not looking ahead and looking around corners, right? So first of all, when you feel fear, and this was said earlier by Renee and Tiffany as well, when you start to fear that, first embrace it. Says, okay, that's me looking around corners, and that's a good thing. But now I have to harness that and wrangle that before it gets out of control and or do something wrong. So let me just acknowledge that I'm feeling that, embrace that I'm feeling that, and then recenter myself. Ask questions, reach out to resources. That's why you have preceptors. But again, that's why I said your fourth person in that is the entire team. Because if you just become preceptor focused and you don't build relationships outside of your preceptor, they're not going to be there for you in a critical moment. The idea of building relationships is you don't wait until you need to vent to build them. You don't wait until you're in an emergency. You're building them proactively so that way your relationships are not just based on conflict in critical situations or negativity because you're venting. So you're actually going to someone that you've already established as a friend when things are going really well. You're like, oh, I'm having a really difficult day. So begin building your relationships early, begin building them widely, because otherwise that can be certainly a pitfall. I certainly agree about physicians, your residents, all of that. Engagement is going to be your best friend, your engagement level, your enthusiasm level. And in my organization, we do clinical excellence awards every year during Nurses Week. And one of our categories is Rising Star. And that category is for a new grad nurse. And the reason it's there is it's for that stellar nurse that just out the gate shows all of the fundamentals of a great teammate and someone who cares about the mission and vision and values of the organization, which is about high quality patient family care, right? And someone who shows that those characteristics and that energy, the skills will come with experience, but those fundamentals are undeniable. Show that, be that from the gate. You're the one that you don't want to be over eager. But you certainly want to say, oh, can I come in there when you do that? Oh, it's not on my checklist, but or maybe it is, but I would need to get one more of those under my belt. So even though you're not my preceptor, if there's anybody today that is doing the C-section, can I come in and see your C-section? Because I need to get one more of those under my belt. Like, just again, building those kinds of relationships really early are incredibly important. Thinking about your own engagement is important. Getting involved sooner than later. Don't get involved too quickly. You need to learn what you're fundamentally there for. But I recommend within 6 months, joining a committee. Hopefully there are shared governance, professional governance committees, quality and safety, or your recruitment and retention committee, or risk research committee. If there's a journal club on the unit, those things you don't need nursing skills and experience for, right? So again, you start exposing yourself, because a pitfall can be if you are too kind of linear in your thinking and not realizing that this work is about a network of things. A year's gone by, 2 years has gone by, and you haven't built relationships, and you haven't gone outside of your unit. And what is my stake in this? One, I want well-rounded professionals. I want future CNOs. There needs to be more Black CNOs, right, Dr. Dudley? I want future.
That's my button right there, right?
Future leaders, and this is leadership thinking, quite frankly. Right? And you can build your leadership competencies, even if you never become a formal leader, if that's not your interest. You are a leader to that patient and family member when you're giving care for your shift. You are a leader at the bedside. You are. They need you to be. If you're not, get started, right? And so their wellness and their well-being is dependent on your leadership. And so if you are not walking in that power early and developing that early, you run the risk. And we've all seen it in our careers, very seasoned nurses that's not a competency that they've developed, right? And it can result in unsafe situations for patients and teammates. So just again, keeping in mind that level of self-awareness is incredibly important.
Absolutely. I want to stay in that leadership vein. That's where my next question is going. But I wanted to add something about the adjustment, right? That transition. It's one piece that's huge is going to be your time management, right? So 12 hours, if your hospital has 12-hour shifts, sounds like a very long time, and sounds like enough time to get everything done, right? No. So when you're working with your preceptors, everybody does it a little bit differently in terms of how they plan out their day, how they prioritize their patient care, and what things come first, what can wait. But learn those strategies. It'll really help you in terms of managing that overwhelmness that everybody talks about. Get a routine going. Right? And try to stick to it as much as possible. So if you have something that comes at you that's kind of out of the way, at least you had a plan, you had a foundation, and it'll help the day go a lot smoother. So that's just one thing I wanted to add. Renee, did you have anything?
No.
Okay. So moving on to the next question, which is about leadership. Right. And when we hear that term, a lot of times your mind goes to a title, a manager, or, the CNO, or whatever leadership structure is in your organization. But I love that Ophelia mentioned about leadership at the bedside, because we are all leaders in our profession, right? And it starts at the bedside, right? So how can novice nurses, and anyone can answer this, how can novice nurses emerge as leaders in their new roles?
And you know you're speaking my love language. You're talking
Yes, yeah, I know I'm pushing all your buttons now, yes.
That's a jam.
Jump in.
Leadership is not a title, right? It's not a role. Titles are borrowed, because if you leave the job, the title stays at the job. The title doesn't stay with you. Leadership is the transformation. It's not the transaction. And so when you're at the bedside, and Ophelia, I love that you said, like, you are the patient and family's leader. Like, you are the leader at the bedside, because that's really where it starts, with the advocacy, with the communication, with the speaking up, with the integrity, with the empathy, with the, your ethics. That's the beginning foundations of a leader. It's not the title. You don't have to go back to school to get another degree. You don't have to get a specialty certification, which I would like for you to, because it validates you as an expert in your fields, but okay. But there's things that you can do at the bedside that positions you as the subject matter expert for your patient, right? Not necessarily for the whole, women and children service line, for your patient. So what does that mean? Being knowledgeable about what's happening that day for your patient, being your patient's advocate, anticipating what's happening, collaborating with the other people in the interdisciplinary fields that's caring for this patient as well, communicating to your patient about what's going on, asking them what their goals are, communicating their goals back to the team, and really being that liaison and that person in the middle, that when you're having rounds and when they're having patient family meetings, that they're looking at you as the expert on the patient, because you've built that rapport with everyone. You know what's happening, you know what all the sides are saying, and you're the one that's helping everybody close the loop. As a new nurse, just doing that alone positions you as a leader. We're not talking about you being the charge nurse or you being a preceptor, which I would want you to do for the future, but in getting your foundations and your foot on solid ground as a nurse, it literally starts with having a handle on your assignment. And what does that mean? And speaking up and being prepared. And so, like Dr. Duntley just mentioned, with time management, how do you set your intentions for the day and looking at your patient and what they're here for and saying, okay, this is how my day is going to flow. And so that in the event there is something that comes out of nowhere and there's a curveball, the whole day is not lost, right? And I'm not scrambling and starting from scratch, because I had structure up until this point, and I can recover because I have a plan on where to kind of jump back in. As a new grad, that is how you can start illustrating yourself as a leader on the unit, without having the title and without going back to get an extra degree or anything like that. It literally starts with managing yourself so that you can manage your patients. That's emotional intelligence. And then using that to speak up, to be that person that kind of closes the loop with everyone else.
Thank you so much.
I like to add patient education, just like Tiffany said, include them in your day. You have to include them in your day. Keep them up to date. Educate them on things that are expected, okay? And in the time management piece, if you're getting a report and somebody, like in the OB world, labor and delivery, antibiotics means, if you're getting a report and you hear that a patient has antibiotics scheduled every so and so hours. Time management, what that looks like is setting an alarm 30 minutes before so you know to pull it, right? Time management looks like if you're stuck in a room with another patient and you know that the time is coming up, delegate, right? Delegate, hey, can you stop into 402 and pull my, go get my antibiotics for them and hang it for me because I'm stuck in this room. That's what it looks like to manage your time.
Thank you. Sometimes you hear the terms, but yeah, given those concrete examples kind of puts it in perspective. Thank you so much, Renee.
I definitely agree with everything that was said, and would like to talk a little bit about about thinking about leadership as a formal role. because certainly there is leadership at the bedside. There is a leader in you and everything that you do. If you don't feel it, then find it, because it's there always. And then there is the reality of formal leadership roles. And this is incredibly important for us. And I think I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, because it's, I think, something that's near and dear to all of us. But listen, nursing is still only about, if that, 30% people of color altogether. So there is still a great need for nurses of color, and Black nurses in particular. I think Black nurses about somewhere between 9 to 11%, depending on which database you use. There is still a great need for us at the bedside, and even more so as you go up the chain in leadership. There is a paucity of Black nurses at the director level and above. And so this is incredibly important. One, what are your goals? You might know that very early on, that you want to go into leadership. You might not. I didn't. I gave my assistant nurse manager a very difficult time when she told me I had to become a charge nurse. I distinctly remember that night working and getting my eval, and she said, "It's time." And I said, "No, I am a charge nurse's best friend. I will always help. I will always check the code card without being asked, and make sure there's enough Pitocin in the fridge and all those good things. But I do not want to be in charge." I was pushed to do it, and found my passion in leadership. So there's a lot of ways to get here. But if you decide that that's a path that you want to take, and that you want, or you already know that you're interested in it, there are opportunities to expose yourself. There are opportunities to, you may not say so in your first year, or you might, at your performance eval, you are asked about your goals, hopefully. If you are not asked about your goals, offer them. You have a chance to do a self-eval typically for your performance review. In your self-eval, you should be writing your goals. You should be writing your short-term goals. What do you want to achieve for the next year? But also it's a great time to say, ultimately, I am interested in a formal nursing leadership role. And that's a really great thing for your manager to know, because what are the opportunities? Once you get your feet wet, there are opportunities in helping out with the schedule. There are opportunities with working on projects. There are lots of lean projects. That's more around opportunities to reduce waste and save dollars on the unit. Those are staff-driven projects. How can we use less IV bags or smaller volume IV bags to reduce waste, or things like that? Or what don't we have enough of? There are safe patient handling committees to make sure that we don't promote occupational safety. There's a number of things that you can do that all have a leadership lens, that all give you some sense into how stuff works, because that's what leadership is. To me, if you distill it down, it's how stuff works. That is operations and people. It's understanding kind of how it goes, and then once you understand how it works, what drives people, what do they need, then it's your job to pour into that, right? What drives operations? What does the operation need? What drives the client? What does the client or customer need, which is your patient and family member, or your internal customers, which are your teammates in other departments and disciplines. So really, to me, leadership is how stuff works, and how you can fuel that. And so there are so many opportunities for you to start to, one, make your interest known. And if you're not really ready to make your interest known, some people are more assertive than others that way, right? They'll just say, "I want to be you someday." I've been in interviews. I've been the interviewer when someone said that. I went, "Oh, okay, great." And then you have people who are hesitant to say what their goals are, but still you can seek out those opportunities to just learn how things work, right? And you will start to see the leadership role in that. Then as you obviously, somewhere around 2 to 3 years in to your role, you can start to look at perhaps an assistant nurse manager role, right? That has a clinical component to it typically, but then has this managerial element to it. And if you're truly, truly a rock star and the timing is right and the need is there, that could happen even somewhere in the 1 to 2 years, because everybody is different. And depending on what you bring to it, remember, leadership is a practice as well. So former leadership is also a practice. I consider myself a leadership practitioner. I'm probably not the sharpest OB nurse anymore. But the skills that I hone, just like, the bedside nurse hones their venipuncture skills or their Foley insertion skills, mine are leadership skills. And I take my practice very, very seriously, right? So the same way you do. So I get certified in leadership things. To what Tiffany said about you don't need an advanced degree or certification to do those things, all true. I will tell you, get them anyway. I'm a big proponent of get all the things. Make sure it's value added. Don't just get certified just to be getting certified. Make sure this shows some direction, and not that you're kind of wanting to be a jack of all trades, but know what the tuition reimbursement is at your organization. Know what programs are covered in that tuition reimbursement. Know what continuing education dollars are dedicated, and use them. If you're allotted continuing education monies per year, do not leave that money on the table. Go to conferences, virtual conferences, in-person conferences. Make sure you run them by your manager to make sure that they would be approved and covered by your continuing education policy, but use them. And then making sure that you are documenting your work. This is incredibly important. This is something that I recommend as a leader. There's a great framework. I can't think of it right now. I got it offline, and I give it to all of my leaders. And it is, because again, it's about how do I add value? So it has these different domains. It's called a key accomplishments list. And it says, like, for instance, this saved money, this improved team morale, this did this, right? So you document the initiative, you do a very short, a very succinct overview of what was the issue. So here's the initiative. What was the issue? What did you do, or how did you contribute to it? And what of these domains did it impact? It impacted one, it saved money, improved team morale, could be a few of those domains. And you keep a running list. This is nothing that any organization I've been a part of has offered as a form. I found it online and I give it to every teammate. This is my third role where I give it to my teammates and I say, this is what you bring to your mid-year review and your performance review. Because when you put down that you've exceeded expectations, I need to see this list to show me that you have, right? But it's not just about the performance reviews. It is how you are keeping track of your career map. Even if you don't quite know yet what that career map is, when you go to look at this list of key accomplishments, you start to see something building. Wait a minute, I'm doing all these projects that point me in this direction or that direction. Also, it is that thing you look at when you have a really rough day and you made a mistake on something, because mistakes will happen. If you've never made a mistake as an experienced nurse, I say that to the panel, then we are not self-aware. we didn't find out. Mistakes will, hopefully they are not severe state mistakes. Hopefully they don't cause patient harm or harm to you, but they will happen. And when you are feeling really, really awful, you need to be able to pull out that sheet and see how amazing you are, because you are, right? So those are some of the things that you can do to help you, one, start the career map, start to think about what you're interested in, keep track of what your contributions are and the value that you're adding. And if that list is not blossoming, then you need to talk to your mentor and rethink about, do I have blinders on, right? Because this list should be growing in terms of what the contributions are and what I'm bringing to the table. And then that is what also helps you in your elevator speech about why you are ready for the assistant nurse manager job, and then the nurse manager job, and then the director, and then the CNO, right? And we forget sometimes what we offer because we're just doing. You need to write it down. You need to have a brag book. That is a part of it, because still you're always pitching. You're always pitching yourself. And that is something that when you think about formal leadership roles, why you? What makes you think that you can galvanize other people and motivate other people and inspire other people, but more importantly, serve other people in a different capacity? What makes you think you can do that? And it can't just because, well, you know, people listen to me, people like me. Leadership is more than that. And so you want to have substantive reasons on how you improved the business case, because hospitals are businesses. So what did you do to help the business case, the mission, vision, value of the organization, save money, you know, make money, whatever it is that you did. If it's even through your HCAP scores, how you help improve the patient experience, all of those things. So just think about, continue to think about, again, comes back to how are you adding value, and being able to demonstrate that constantly, and knowing what's expected of you and what's expected of leaders, so that you can start to chart your path towards those formal roles.
I'm going to share something in the chat. It's a brag book, the link to a brag book, because I'm all about that too. Because as nurses, we are a brand, but we need to talk in tangible, you know, evidence about what it is that we do that makes us the leader, that makes us valuable, that makes us worth the compensation that we're asking for. So like Ophelia said, you don't necessarily have to have this a part of your HR file, but you need to know and keep track of your success and what you've contributed to your unit. You can bring this with you to an interview. You can bring this with you to a performance appraisal, annual eval, and also just for you to keep track of the things that you've done. When we come to talk about leadership positions, when you're out of the novice phase, and you're into the competent and proficient phase on Pat Benner's trajectory of novice to expert nurse, this is where you start looking at, where do I want to take my nursing career? What is the trajectory? What is the legacy? What is the transformation that I want to leave? When you're brand spanking new out of school, you're not even thinking that. Or you already know, I'm going to nursing school because I want to be X, Y, and Z, and this is why I'm going to nursing school. But where do you house all of that? And how can you speak to it? Having a brag book or a professional portfolio is what is going to help you. It's not a resume, it's not a CV, it's your corporate receipts. That's what it is. It is your corporate receipts.
I love that.
I was gonna ask that. Like, what?
Gotta have the receipts.
X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, all right, show me. And now when you pull out your nice portfolio in your interview, you can give me a write-up, a summary, you can speak to it, you can give me metrics, you can give me something that I can say, okay, she worked on this and this was the outcomes, this was something measurable, right? Your goals should be smart, but they should be smarter. So we know SMART goals to be specific, measurable, attainable, relatable, timely, right? Or realistic, timely, whatever you want to use the R. The extra ER to make it smarter is, did you evaluate it? What is the result? Don't just give me a goal that's just smart. Make it smarter. Did you go back and look to see, did I actually achieve it? And do I need to reevaluate it and throw this back into another PDSA cycle? So see, now we're getting into like the meat and potatoes of leadership, which is not what
well, but no, I love that you're saying that, because it's the meat and potatoes of great practice, right? So
Definitely.
it's not just leadership. And I love that you CSA, because really that continuous performance improvement is what drives evidence-based nursing practice. So there's not much you're going to find in leadership, formal leadership roles, that you're not going to find in the practice that you do. It's just about transferring that to a different paradigm to some degree, but it's still those basics. We should always be in a process of continuous performance improvement. There should always be a quality management element to what we do. It just shows up differently. What I say to my teams is, HCAPs, right? All those domains that are in the hospital, consumer assessment for healthcare professional. What is it? Health.
Yes.
Say it again.
Hospital consumer assessment.
Healthcare providers and systems.
Yes.
There we go. Okay. we use the either the mnemonic or acronym so much that you sometimes forget, but we got it. Okay, so all the domains in HCAPs, I can take every single domain in HCAPs and make it a leadership domain and say, this is how you're supposed to care for your staff. That's it, right? So even something like quiet at night, you say, well, Ophelia, how can you make quiet at night something about how you care for staff? Well, let's see, what does quiet do? It's about creating an environment that promotes well-being. Oh, that's my job as a leader for my staff.
Right.
Right. So it's constantly connecting those dots, and it's all interconnected. There's nothing separate. Nothing pains my heart more than fraught staff leader relationships, because that means that someone has not connected the dots to say literally the principles behind what you do are the principles behind what I do. It's just in a different role and capacity. Right? That you're responsible for patient safety. I'm responsible for your safety, not just your occupational safety in terms of physical, but also for your psychological safety. That's my job as a leader. Oh, but by the way, that's your job for the patients and family members.
Yeah.
And I think that once we have those healthy staff leader relationships, more and more staff are going to want to go to leadership roles, because it is an honor, right? To be a leader, to serve. It's not just about having these really big titles and all of that and that power. It is an honor to serve when you understand the interconnectedness of all of our roles. And when I reach out to the staff in my areas, I reach out to them and say, dear colleague. I talk to them about us being colleagues, because ultimately to the patient, that's what we are. The patient doesn't care about my lofty title. I'm a nurse, right? And so I am hoping that you all here in your journey will consider formal leadership roles. You do not need to be in a formal leadership role, but we do need more Black leaders. We do need more effective, empathetic Black leaders. That is when we talk about health equity, and I'm not going to go down that road, but when we talk about health equity, that is a big part of it. Is really who is doing that work in healthcare settings. So please consider it. It is truly an honor to lead and serve.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing up health equity, because we are definitely going there. Why are we talking about leadership with new grads? Because it's important as you come into the profession, as you officially enter, right? We're looking at you all to do big things, right? There's a lot riding on you all coming in to help us that are already in the field make change. And so part of the mission of the League of Extraordinary Black Nurses is to offer you the support and resources needed so that you can take that knowledge and bring it back to our communities, because our communities are the ones that are having these disparate outcomes, right? So it's not just for us to, be sharing these gems for you to hold and keep for yourself, but collectively we can all make an impact once you get in there and you start getting into your practice and you figure out your path, whether that is a formal leadership role or being a leader in whatever capacity you decide to pursue, whether it's through being a nurse educator or, a quality assurance person. There is so much in nursing to do. And we want you to be leaders in whatever you decide, whether it's at the bedside or in those other capacities. So that's why we're talking about leadership as new grads. We're getting close to the end, and I want to kind of touch on the current climate of healthcare, right? So that includes health equity, but given the recent changes with the pandemic, with all the political and social unrest, what advice do you have for our new grads in entering, who are entering this current healthcare landscape? How do they, what do they do? What should their focus be? Just coming in where we currently are. What advice do you have?
I'll start with that. I always like to acknowledge, and I'll certainly just pause really quickly to acknowledge to everyone that, it has been a very tough year and a half for our world. For all of us on this call today, you are here, you are well. And that is a beautiful thing. And for any of the trials and tribulations you may have gone through over the last year, just know that you are here, right? And thriving, and you're here because you're looking to the future. And that's exciting. And that's what resilience is. You know, I would certainly say asking, you know, going back to interviews, asking what resources the organization has put together in that lens, given this last year, given the pandemic that we are still experiencing. We are not post, given the persistent pandemic of racism and multiple other forms of oppression in our society. What coping resources has this organization either instituted or enhanced in response? That's an incredibly important question. If there's any organization, especially in healthcare, that has not responded with additional coping resources, not what we've always had. It's not about what you've always had. Surely you must have upgraded or enhanced in response to what's been going on. That is a red flag. So understanding what are those resources, and making sure that you avail yourself of those resources. Employee assistance programs are things that are probably already EAPs, probably have already been in place. But there are other things some people have. They offer free, you know, free therapy resources. You could talk to someone right on the spot. There's a number of things that may be in place, but you really want to know how they've expanded that in response to what's gone on the last year. You want to know about their diversity, equity, and inclusion work. That's incredibly important. Any organization, especially in the last year, that has not expanded their work or at least instituted it, red flag. You want to know what that work has been and what does it look like in an actionable way. And I have to say this, this is my philosophy, beyond conversations. If they tell you, well, we host crucial conversations on, we do a multicultural day, just no. That's a no. You need to understand really what is the organization doing in an actionable way. If they're saying to you, well, we have taken, you know, steps to increase the number of the people of color in our leadership at the leadership levels throughout our organization. We have put together employee resource groups, ERGs, for say in this case, on the focus on anti-racism for our Black employees, or affinity groups, if you will. And then you might even ask, well, what is done in those groups? These are important questions. It doesn't mean that the answer has to be perfect, because let's face it, the organizations have still not figured this out, right? But you need to know that there's some work being done on it, and that the work is being done in earnest. Why is that important? As Dr. Dunkley mentioned earlier, my doctoral research was on racism-related stress and psychological resilience in Black and African-American nurses. And it was some very interesting findings, and I'll just share with you the one that really set apart for me why this is so important. My study was not big. It launched end of April last year, just when we were starting the pandemic. So I didn't have a whole lot of respondents. So it's a preliminary study, and I will continue to build on it, but it was important work that was near and dear to me. And I started on that work 3 years ago when no one was really talking about this. And actually, I was, by some people, discouraged to do it, and said, why does it matter? And that's not nursing, that's HR. And I said, so, and then all of a sudden it became very apt and timely, right? And it's being published in a very renowned peer-reviewed journal. So I'm very excited about that. But one of the findings was, in interviewing these Black nurses at various levels, had a very good distribution across experience levels, roles in the organization, leaders, as well as frontline, is that they did not perceive themselves to have a high level of resilience. I was shocked. And then I was upset with myself for being shocked, right? Of course, with all of the things that are going on, and at that point when I did the survey, George Floyd hadn't been murdered yet. But there's been Trayvon, there's been Tamir, there's been, Walter Scott, there's been a plethora. We've been living this. And what it shows is how we are walking around with our heads up, being Black girl magic and Black guy magic and doing all of those things. And we're falling apart inside. That's what those results said to me was, yeah, we're still doing our jobs, but we don't feel inside that we're bouncing back. We're struggling inside. And when I think about that, I can't imagine any of us going into a workplace that is not, has not made a focused effort to support us given our unique experiences. Because the idea of focusing on racism related stress for caregivers is that we experience all the same stressors as any other human beings. Divorce, dog died, getting married, that's a stressor, right? Planning a wedding, as Renee mentioned earlier. We experience all of those normal human stressors plus racism. And then if we have another identity that's been marginalized, we may be Black and LGBTQ. Or Black and disabled and LGBTQ, whatever that looks like, all those intersections make our experience very, very different. And now we're coming into work and we're pouring out and we're giving. Well, how are we being replenished? You need to know what is there to replenish you and to fill your cup. And not just based on the relationships you built, which I talked about earlier, but based on structures of the organization. So that's what I would offer.
Phew.
That was, Ophelia, I feel like I need your number because I,
Yes.
All right. Yes, please.
outside of this, because this fills my cup and makes it flow over, because this is all my love languages. What I want new grads and student nurses to know going into the hospital setting or any type of healthcare setting is that diversity is more than race. A lot of people use the word diversity when they mean race. It is not interchangeable. Race is differences, and there's differences in everything. There's differences on virtual platforms. There's differences in flowers, food. We're not a monolith as a people, as a race. And so when you hear the word diversity and they use that word as a catch-all for everything, that is a red flag. The other thing is inclusion is more than the 3 F's, which is food, fun, and flags. That's the other thing. When you were asking your facility what they're doing in regards to equity and inclusion, I don't even use the word diversity. I say equity and inclusion. And they said, well, it's March 17th and it is St. Patrick's Day and we had corned beef and cabbage. Like, what? It's more than just food, flags, and fun. It's Pride Month now. Everybody and their mama got a rainbow flag out. How are you showing people who identify with this group that you are being equitable, you are being inclusive, and you are being an active ally for the mission that they are striving to get, because they're still a marginalized, oppressed group. And so are we changing our forms to take out she and he and asking for people to, use their preferred pronouns? Or do we have non-gendered or gender neutral bathrooms? Like, what is the facility doing other than food, flags, funds, pins, banners? That's performative, right? And so when you are going into a workplace, you want to know that they are actually taking action and not just being performative, because every month there's a different something to highlight and celebrate and make aware. Wearing orange for gun violence awareness. That's what's happening this month. Everybody's being encouraged to wear orange for gun violence awareness. All right, so when July 1st comes around and we take our orange off, do we not care about gun violence anymore? So we need to do more than be performative. And equity and inclusion is more than just nursing, right? It's who we are as a society and a culture, but also as a new nurse. If you do not feel safe in a patient environment, because patients are being assholes. Let's just say it like that, right? They're using racial slurs. They are discriminating against you and things of that nature. That is not another day at work. That is not another day at work. You need to speak up and say something.
Not okay.
And not just take that, right? You have to advocate for yourself so that you can be an advocate for your patients. And so when you're in situations where you're being discriminated against, patients are asking for another nurse because you're Black, or another nurse because you have an accent, or another nurse because you're wearing a head covering, that's not okay. That's ignorance. And I know at my hospital, because I am the chair of the Equity and Inclusion Committee, we don't change assignments based on ignorance, because everybody that is hired here has the qualifications to take care of you, ma'am or sir, right? So you need to speak up so that we as a hospital can care for you and support you. And whatever decision you want to make, if you don't want to take care of that person, then that's fine. But we don't side with the patient, because the patient sometimes isn't always right. And my goal as the educator and the chair of the Equity and Inclusion Committee is to support my staff first. And so what is it that my staff need and want in that situation? But you have to say something, because the other thing too, nurses think that the C-suite and leadership knows everything that's happening, and we don't. We don't. Unless it's told to us, it's in a report, it's in an email, somebody stopped by the office. We don't know what happened on 5 West. Like, you need to say something. And so I think a lot of times I often hear, well, this happened and they did nothing about it. We didn't know to do something about it. So incident reporting is really important. Going up your chain of command is really important. Documenting events is really important. One, so we can trend and track, but two, that we can actually take action. So those are my words on that. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Renee, you have anything?
Yes, I would just like to piggyback off of what Ophelia was talking about. How do you release when you had that shift? Like, where do you go to? The other day I wrote something about my own mantra on Facebook that I share, and I want to share it with you guys today. One of them says, reflect on your life and know that you are right where you're supposed to be. Things happen for a reason. Release bad vibes and low vibrational energy. Renew and start over fresh, like the brand new day you wake up to. Stop being so hard on yourself and live in the moment, because tomorrow isn't promised to any of us. When you release low vibrational energy, do it in a journal. That is the best way. Writing out how you feel, get in tune with your inner emotional intelligence. You have to release that somewhere. Okay, if you don't have a mentor, if you don't have a support system, get a journal, right? So as easily as you can release, as you can renew with daily affirmations, right? Uplifting yourself. The words that you say to yourself mean something, okay? And so you definitely have to learn your inner self, because you cannot show up to work. I was showing up to work crying and didn't want to go and dreaded, and I just dreaded nursing, right? And it was because I did not release the energy that I was taking from shift to shift. The bad energy from the coworkers and the patients' complaints and the doctors yelling at you. You have to release all that stuff. Given that COVID happened, a lot of students that's coming into, passing NCLEX and they're terrified. You guys are terrified because you may not have had a hands-on clinical practice the last year, right? And so you're not sure of that's where you need to say, speak for yourself, advocate, hey, can I please shadow a nurse? Or go into a volunteer role before you actually get that job, right? I know that's easier said than done because we need the money, but at the end of the day, you have to work, you have to know your inner self. You have to be able to release that bad energy and renew it and fill your cup up in order to pour into other people, your patients, your colleagues. What if they have a bad day? Y'all just can't be two nurses having a bad day on the unit like that. That's not going to work. So make sure you do some type of inner emotional intelligence.
Dr. Dunkley, may I add something really quickly? Because I think Renee said something powerful again about our own accountability. Once again, just remembering and dovetailing something that Tiffany said, diversity is not race alone. It's so many things. It's so vast. And so part of that self-check and checking your energy before you bring it into the healthcare space called your job is being mindful of what your own biases are, being mindful of what your own challenges are around something as well. And it may not be race, but we are not bias free just by being a part of a group that has been historically marginalized. We have our own stuff. Make sure you're checking that stuff, right? Because we do have patients, we do have teammates who experience psychological harm or can from our own biases and our own mess, if you will. So identify what that mess might be and make sure that at the end of the day, professionalism prevails. And, you know, I talk to my teams about game face. It's not about your heart and mind changing right away. It's about doing the right thing and your feeling follows. And the feeling follows. It's about knowing that you have an obligation to your patients and your teammates to show up respectfully, empathetically, professionally, and regardless as to what your views are. And it's important for us to have that conversation as well, because sometimes if we make diversity just about race, then we're all probably, you know, and even then that's tricky. But we kind of see ourselves as kind of above the fray, that I don't have that issue. Well, no, it's bigger. So it is also what this past year also means is that it should heighten our own self-awareness, just not our awareness of things that happen to us, but also, am I at all a part of the problem in any of that I may have ingested and internalized? And how can I make sure that I am not propagating any of those evils, if you will?
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Well, my cup is so full. I can't imagine, you know, for the new grads in this, in the audience that are tuning in on Facebook or wherever you are, you know, this has been so valuable. I had a thought and I just lost it. It'll come back to me. But I want to be able to, oh, I got it. So this is one thing I wanted to add for you all. Get involved, right? Just because you're new doesn't mean that you don't have, like everyone has said, that you don't have value. Get involved in your professional organizations, right? If you choose a specialty, get involved in the organization that represents that specialty. Go to conferences, you know, to develop yourself. The last thing you want to do is stop learning when you graduate. That you have to keep yourself fresh. You have to keep your practice current. You have to update yourself on what's going on in the world and around you, and your patient care can only benefit from it. Also, get involved not just in those professional organizations, but in your communities, right? There are grassroots organizations everywhere that are doing the work on the ground to address these health equity issues. Read. You must read. Subscribe to some journal, and a lot of your professional organizations will come with a subscription to journals so that you can stay abreast of what's going on, and so that you can help do something about the issues, right? You want to be informed. So that's the last thing I want to say before we go into the chat. I know there are just a couple of questions in the chat, and then we'll open up the floor for any additional questions. The first thing I see here, is it normal to feel overwhelmed by the number of modules to be completed during the orientation?
Yes.
Right? A collective, yes. Is it also? Yeah.
I do modules. So I'm the educator, right? And I do orientation for our CNAs and our nurse externs. And I'm upset at the amount of modules that I have.
It is a lot.
And then I have to send them reminder emails that their modules aren't complete by the due date. Like, it bothers me. And then every year annually as an organization, we have modules that need to be done by the end of the fiscal year. Yes, it is the least favorite part of the job. Before COVID happened and everything was electronic and digital, we still had modules to do anyway. Welcome to work.
Yeah. And please start the practice of getting that stuff done early. Don't have your I'm looking for, please. It's a part of professional accountability and responsibility. Get your licenses renewed in time. Don't let your registration expire, your CPR. don't let people have to come chasing after you for that stuff. That's part of, your accountability as new grads. I'm just putting it out there because it happens and we want you to start off on the right foot. Someone said Gibbs reflection. I'm not sure, Jennifer, if you want to unmute and clarify what that question was about. I'm not sure.
No, I think that there was just saying something in the discussion. I was like thinking back to the reflection of, I guess, something, just triggered a memory that I had. That's it.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see. Does anyone else have an additional question? Let me scroll back, make sure I didn't miss anything.
While people are thinking of their questions, I do have a free webinar coming up this Wednesday on emotional intelligence. I'll put the registration link in the chat. And it's, to me, emotional intelligence is the key to everything. The key, you want to be a better parent, you want to solve crisis, you want to be a better leader, you want to be a better human. You first have to be self-aware, right? And there's other steps that follows that, but step one is self-awareness. So that is the registration link. Is a Zoom webinar for 8:45 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And it's about an hour long. Just talking about emotional intelligence, because to me, that is the foundation of everything. So if you are available, regardless of where you are in your nursing journey, please stop by.
Excellent. I want to give each of you another opportunity if you'd like to, if you have any initiatives coming up, how can people stay in touch with you, contact information? We can do that right now.
Okay, I'll go.
Go ahead, Renee.
So what I'm working on now is I've developed a crowdfunding campaign, and I'm crowdfunding and raising money because I have the chance to become the first Black-owned tutoring center in the south suburbs of Chicago.
Excellent.
So I have rewards that are offering interactive workshops. And I definitely want you guys to, I'm going to put the link in the chat, but I definitely want you to go by there, see where the money's going to go. We're going to be renovating a retail space. We're crowdfunding for like $10,000. I already got like 1,000. So it's detailing where the money's going to go, how it's going to be used, and all of our funders are getting their names put on our donor wall once the renovations are finished. So, but yes, I have interactive workshops as rewards that you can purchase, and there are some for students and there's some for nurse educators as well. Actually, I have a Black nurse educators fireside chat coming up too. So go to the campaign, check out the rewards, see which one fits for you, and please share, because come on, I need y'all to make this happen with me. I can't do this by myself.
I love it. Thank you so much, Renee. Did you want to talk about your tutoring services as well, if anybody is looking for NCLEX prep?
Yes. So right now I have, it's called NNU Transitions, where we go over like clinical skills, content, and test taking strategies. Okay, so that is at my website, newnursuniversityinc.net. I'll drop that in the chat as well. And I do offer content, knowledge, studies. Well, it's a study success blueprint for nursing students that are currently like senior semester, first semester. So if you're in your program, not quite graduated yet, I do have tutoring one-on-one for a study success blueprint in whatever class you need while you're in the program.
Excellent. Thank you. Now, Tiffany, I know you mentioned the upcoming webinar, but did you want to add anything else?
Yes. So New Nurse Academy has a lot happening this summer. I do have my my mentorship group for student and new to practice nurses called the Personal Preceptor Club, and I see a couple of them are here this evening. So hey, ladies, and so that is an ongoing mentorship that does come with a membership subscription. We meet weekly and we talk about the 5 pillars of life, which is health, wealth, business, love, and family. And if you can get your 5 pillars together that makes you a better person, which makes you a better nurse. So we talk about the transformation and not just clinical skills. So that is the Personal Preceptor Club. I am currently launching the Nurse Leader Accelerator, which is a 4-month leadership at the bedside course. It talks about a little bit of everything that we did today, but goes into detail on how you can be an effective charge nurse, preceptor, conflicts and crisis manager, talk about different styles of leadership, when to use the different styles, and of course, equity and inclusion, and how that is the foundation to grow you into a leader at the bedside without necessarily having to get another degree, but it gets you on that path to leadership. I have an incubator for nurse educators and clinical instructors. So people who are in that space, they're either in their MSN program or they want to be an educator into clinical instruction. I have an incubator that's for them too, that's coming up, as well as me being a speaker, a host, a presenter. I do a lot of consulting work for companies, getting their equity and inclusion council off the ground, helping them put policies into place, and being a speaker on how to be inclusive as a nurse. You can also catch me every Tuesday on Cherokee Uniforms page for Tiff Talk Tuesdays, where we talk about difficult conversations in nursing from a Black nurse perspective.
Awesome.
And you can find me on Instagram where I act up on Instagram.
She keeps it real, y'all, and I love every bit of it.
I act up on Instagram all the time. I am a professional troublemaker. Follow me.
Y'all, please take advantage of the links that are in the chat. Ophelia, did you want to add?
Sure. Here's what I will add is look at Renee, look at Tiffany, and as you are thinking about career mapping, make sure that you add entrepreneurship to your career map. I am not an entrepreneur. I am a diehard entrepreneur. I am, that is what I do. I build within and am really, really proud of the legacies that I am building within organizational structures and how I'm advancing leaders in that process. But I do believe that entrepreneurship is vast and there is so much opportunity for you if that is something that you're interested in. I do a lot of mentorship. I probably should turn that into paid coaching. And maybe one day I will, but my job is super busy. So that's what I focus on. But these women are really, really great examples for all of us, for myself included. I am inspired by you and the work that you are doing as entrepreneurs. For me, I would say I'm on Twitter. That's where I act up. So be careful for that follow. I'm on LinkedIn. By all means, reach out there. I'm on Clubhouse. I do rooms here and there. We'll probably be doing more of them. I'm very, very focused on cultivating Black leaders in any industry, not just nursing. I am, like I said, I am a leadership practitioner, and that is incredibly important to me. So I think that there'll be more coming from me in the future as I think about entrepreneurship, but you have two really great accomplished examples here. So just keep going like these women are. There's so much for us to do.
Forgot to unmute. Thank you so much. Ophelia, if you can put your Twitter handle in the chat so folks can follow you, or any contact information that you want to provide. This has been so good. I want to just open the floor one last time. Does anybody have a quick question, something they forgot, they thought of? Please put it in the chat. But while I'm wrapping up, thank you so much to Tiffany, to Renee, to Ophelia. Awesome, awesome gems that were shared with us here today. And I'm hopeful that you took at least one thing, I know I did, at least one thing away today that can be useful to you as new graduates or soon to be graduates. And we just can't wait to see what you all are gonna do once you enter the profession. Thank you for joining us. Oh, shameless plug. I do have, Renee mentioned journaling, right? Which is a great way to get your thoughts out. You can organize, put your goals down on paper. Something about putting things in writing helps you to, helps push you to actualize it. right? It puts it out into the atmosphere towards manifestation. So it's a really good tool to use. I do have a journal. You can purchase it. It says it's the Seacole Effect Journal. Many of you know I am obsessed with Mary Seacole and her legacy. And so based on the course that I created, and I'm just distracted because I'm putting my stuff in the chat here. The journal is available to anyone. It doesn't have to be, it says for nurse leaders, but like we just discussed, everyone in nursing is considered leader. And you can certainly purchase that and use it to document your journey and your goals. And that is the website that you can go to, and you can look through to see what else you'd like to purchase. So again, I'm Dr. Dania Dunkley, the founder of the League of Extraordinary Black Nurses. We have much more to come this year. Stay tuned for the next workshop for July is upcoming. Subscribe to our page so that you can receive updates and learn about our upcoming events. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Thank you, ladies, again, for your knowledge and for being so willing to share so freely with us. I really appreciate all of you.
Thank you for the forum, Dr. Dunkley.
Thank you, yes.
Before you sign off, I want to take a group picture, so smile. I hate catching people talking, but all right, let's see if I can get your names displayed too. Hold on. 2 seconds. All right, I'm ready. 1, 2. Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Welcome.